Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tiff Talks Tech. I'm Tiffany, and today I want to talk about a shift that has been happening in multifamily, whether we are ready for it or not. We have spent years optimizing for search engines, keywords, backlinks, page rankings, click-through rates, all of that. But what happens when renters stop searching and they start using prompts instead? When instead of Googling apartments near downtown under $2,000, they start asking their AI assistants, find me 3 apartments downtown under $2,000, pet friendly, good reviews, and schedules tours. And just like that, the renter never even came to your website. They did everything using their AI engines. That is what brings us to today's conversation. We're talking the shift from SEO to AEO. That is the shift from search engine optimization to answer engine optimization. And in multifamily, that changes a lot. Let's be very, very clear to start. SEO isn't dead. I work with SEO on a daily basis. Being a marketer working for a company who actively manages SEO, but it's no longer the only thing that we should be focusing on. I mean, it should never have been the only thing we focused on, but it's not necessarily the finish line anymore. When we put a heavy focus on SEO, it's about getting found, getting clicked on, getting more traffic, which are still things we need to move towards. And I can give you recommendations, my number one being Effortless, if you need somebody to help you figure out that side of things. But then there's this other side, which is AEO, and that is a different ballpark. That is more about getting selected, getting summarized about, and getting acted on as well. Because AI, it's not browsing websites the way that humans do. It doesn't scroll, it doesn't admire your beautiful images, it doesn't care about your carousel. It parses out the information, it extracts information, it compares, and then makes a decision. And that means that our websites are no longer the only marketing tools. They are becoming the main data sources that these AI engines are scraping from. And most multifamily sites are not necessarily built for that. So it's something we're going to need to focus on moving forward. So let's talk about when your website isn't just for the humans anymore. The robots are taking over. And here's what gets really uncomfortable because, like I've said, we've spent decades designing websites for that emotional feel, the aesthetic. We want to tell stories with our websites and have visual presentation. But now we're also having to work into those website designs the readability for machine learning, structured data, and APIs, real-time availability, all of that, tour scheduling logic. It needs to be built in because agentic AI, meaning AI that can take action, it's not just answering questions. It doesn't just want that pretty website. It wants access to all these things like pricing, availability, policies, tour options, lease terms, because it's scraping for all of that. And if your website can't provide that clearly and consistently, AI is going to move on to the next property that it can because your information is not easily accessible to it. That leads me to a conversation that we have often with clients working with Effortless. And like I've talked about before, I oversee marketing for 3 companies. So like Effortless Ads is not the only one that I work with, but I am familiar because I've heard this conversation come up. People have some confusion around we have dynamic landing pages. And what those do is it uses AI to optimize for your specific offerings. So for example, if you have 2 bedrooms available that you're really trying to push, those dynamic landing pages are going to find people who are looking for that specifically and offer up the landing pages to those people. And I know we get a lot of confusion, like I don't need a landing page. I have a website and my website has everything that I need. So why would I need these extra landing pages when really the landing pages are designed for 1, the end user, and 2, also for AI to be able to scrape and help find what that person is looking for. So in reality, you think, okay, I have a website, that's enough. It really isn't enough anymore. You really need to have information designed for a multitude of things rather than just the person you're hoping to find your site. Now, let's take this even a step further. Imagine a near future, and honestly, we're not that far from it, where a renter never even goes to a property website. They just go straight to AI, and the AI returns them a list of apartments already filtered, already compared for what they're looking for, and already prioritized for what works best for that user. And then the renter just picks from that list. So here's the real question for marketers. What happens when your website is not the primary place that discovery happens? What happens when there's no click, no session, no time on site metric, all those things that we value and we're consistently measuring? Those go away. And how do we start to measure success moving forward? And this is where our traditional marketing KPIs are going to start to break. Traffic is going to become less important than inclusion, accuracy, representation, and favorability inside AI generated results. And then suddenly, marketing becomes less about driving people to your site and more about making sure that those AI systems can really understand, trust, and recommend your brand. I mean, I've seen this all the time. I may have hosted an ad that didn't hit the right audience, and I felt like I was just wasting dollars putting it down the drain because I got all of these clicks, all these views, our website traffic went through the roof. But was anybody actually interested in our product? Good question. Not sure, because we didn't get an influx of site submissions or anything like that. And I think if I had optimized better for the audience I was targeting, the results would have been very different. So thinking about the switch from SEO to AEO, here's what actually changes. SEO was really continues to be the thought of, how do I rank? Where am I on Google and the search engines? But AEO is going to ask, how do I become the answer to their question? And that means shifting the context a little bit from only looking at keywords. I don't think that's going to go away, but we can't only be looking at that. So looking at keywords to looking more at the context around what's being asked, what's being looked for. It's going to shift focus from pages to entities of information, and also from clicks to outcomes. Instead of getting clicks to your site, you're probably going to get more leases, but it's all going to look differently in that renter journey. So instead of optimizing pages for only search engines, which, like I said, that is not going away, we are now optimizing for two things. We're optimizing for, yes, continued on the search engines, but also for that AI decision making process. And that includes clear pricing logic, making sure that your policies are transparent and that AI can read them, having consistent availability on that is accurate, having structured location data and what's in the area, and then reputation signals that AI can interpret, not just display. I remember one of the biggest things that was difficult when I worked on the operation side was updating the locations nearby. I was always like, oh my gosh, there's so many of these and things are always changing in the area. I think that's one of the things that's going to continue to get more important. Like, people are going to want to know what's near the stadium and that I could live at for under this amount of money, or what's near my place of work, and all that stuff just becomes more, like I said, all that stuff becomes far more important to pay attention to. And that all of that requires marketing to partner more deeply than ever with different departments like IT, operations, revenue management, and vendors. I mean, I used to oversee maybe around 70 properties. I didn't know what was nearby this random Lehigh property when I lived in SoCal. I didn't know, but I had to lean on my operations team and the people who were there on a daily basis to tell me what's going on and doing consistent audits of the area and their websites to make sure that I had the proper information. And we just really need to remember that AEO, it's not going to be just a marketing tactic. It's going to become an infrastructure problem and something that everybody should take an interest in. Now, let's pause here for just a minute because not all AI interacts with your website the same way. And understanding this matters a lot for marketers. Think of AI in three broad categories. First is going to be generative AI. And I think of that as like the talkers. So that's going to be like your ChatGPTs, your Claudes, your Copilots, all of that. Those are the ones that answer questions, they summarize content, explain your options, and then they make recommendations for you. They don't necessarily take the action, but they're going to influence that decision. And so for marketers, that means your content needs to be clear, consistent, and trustworthy enough to be summarized correctly. If your pricing, your policies, positioning, they're all vague or contradictory, those models are either going to misrepresent you or ignore you altogether. You're just going to get missed. The second one is retrieval-based AI, and we call these the finders. So these models specialize in searching, pulling, comparing, and citing information. Think of these as the super-powered research assistants. For multifamily, these models decide which properties appear in AI-generated comparisons, which ones get mentioned, and which ones pretty much just don't exist. Here, structured data matters more than clever copy will, because if the model can't find you cleanly and easily, it can't recommend you to anybody. And then, last but not least, there is agentic AI, which we think of as the doers. This one is a really big game changer. And these models, they don't just answer, but they act. These models can schedule a tour for you, compare leases, filter availability, or trigger workflows. And they need direct system access, not just pretty pages or PDFs or gated forms. They need like an actual API integration or some kind of real-time data. And this is where multifamily websites must fundamentally change behind the scenes. Here is the part that tends to worry me. As we have all rushed to adopt AI, automate, and scale what we have, we've quietly lost something in all of that marketing, and that is the personal touch. And that's something that I hear all the time. We're optimizing for speed and volume, but a lot of times that comes at the expense of being thoughtful, having that local flavor, and that emotional connection that we all look for. And that's something I hear all the time. Again, not just to mention the companies that I work with, but one of those is key texting. And I know a lot of people are like, well, we just have the AI assistant do that, which can be great. There are certain things that the AI assistants should be doing. But the thing that I love about Key is that they maintain that personal connection, like that being able to communicate with a resident or prospect in real time, being a real person, that can be so refreshing. And that's where I think as marketers, we all need to step back into a little bit of a different role and not just think about building campaigns or driving for leads, but we also need to think about experience design and the renter journey and partner with the on-site teams to do that. Because AI, they might just generate the short list, but humans are going to live that experience and we can't forget about it. So then that leads to the question, should marketers get closer to the site level? And I think this shift actually demands that we do that. And if AI is handling the discovery and the filtering, the marketing's value moves a little bit more downstream into more of those touch points, follow ups, event strategy, storytelling, all of that, not just necessarily ads or SEO and making sure that our traffic looks good. Marketers need to be involved in how tours are followed up with, how residents are welcome to the community, things like how communities are activated and how those local stories are being told. Because those are the things that AI cannot necessarily replace or take over. Right now, I think it's so important to remember that we are standing in the intersection of AI and marketing, operations, and renter experience. And if marketers don't step into this shift intentionally, it's going to be designed for us by vendors and algorithms instead of with us as a whole. So we all need to be involved in this. AEO is not about abandoning those marketing fundamentals that we may have gone through our career knowing about and learning about. It's about expanding upon them. Like I said, SEO isn't going anywhere. But let's expand and look at all the things that we need to be diving into as technology continues to evolve. Because visibility, it's no longer about just being seen, but it's about being selected by the systems that don't necessarily think like humans do. So let me leave you with this. The future of multifamily marketing, it's not about optimizing only for search engines. It's about also designing for those decision engines. And while AI may shape how renters discover communities, it's still us humans that decide how we feel about living in those communities. And if we forget that, no amount of optimization is going to save us from it. So, if this episode shifted how you think about your website, your KPIs, and your overall role as a marketing, that's the goal. That's what I'm going for. Because the future of multifamily marketing won't belong just to the loudest voices. It's going to belong to the most understandable and relatable ones that integrate both humans and machines in the process. And I hope you walk away with something useful. If this resonates, please let me know on LinkedIn. Let's connect. And thank you so much for joining into this episode.